Most people are really uncomfortable with ambiguity. There's a couple of really good papers on this. I think it's de Burke. They looked at people's responses to stressful situations. And they said, okay, you're going to be given two situations. One is you have a 100% chance for a significant electric shock or 50% chance for a significant electric shock. And they found that people were much more uncomfortable physiologically, but also self-reported with 50% chance for electric shock than they were with 100% chance. So people would rather have pain and know it's going to happen than not know whether it's going to happen or not.
Amazing.
Welcome to Oxford Tea Talks. My name's Saul Betmead de Chasteigner. I'm an alumnus and associate fellow here at the business school. I teach on leadership, innovation and strategy courses. I've got a background in cognitive psychology and I've held senior positions in large commercial organizations like WPP and the United Nations. I'm also a faculty member and senior advisor to the Centre for Democracy and Peace, which is where I met my friend and colleague, Mark. Mark.
Hello, everybody. My name's Mark Clark. I am, fundamentally curious about how strange human beings are when we get together in groups, and in particular how leadership behavior happens, how it emerges, and how it can be nurtured and developed and supported. And I guess I've been on a personal journey into leadership, into complexity, and into conflict. I started out as a corporate lawyer working in the UK and also in India, but in parallel with that, also served in the British Army and then later in the British Foreign Office, so in Iraq, 2003. And from there, embarked on a series of roles in different international organizations in Democratic Republic of Congo, working on emergency humanitarian response, in Papua New Guinea, working on violence reduction, and then spent 12 years serving as CEO of a global peacebuilding organization headquartered in Jordan, but working around the world. And so along the way, my leadership journey was greatly informed by a master's program here at Saï Business School on consulting and coaching for change. And having returned to the UK 2 years ago, I'm an associate fellow and also a program director here at the business school, teaching on a variety of leadership programs and advanced negotiation programs, both open and custom programs, and for public and private sector audiences. And I think, Saul, the reason we got together and started having this conversation was a quote that resonated, I think, with both of us. And it's a quote by the character Ralph Fiennes plays in the recent film Conclave, and it goes like this: "There is one sin which I have come to fear above all else, certainty. Certainty is the great enemy of unity, the deadly enemy of tolerance." So that's the provocation for today, Saul. Why did that quote resonate with you?
Quite early on in my career, I had a very binary understanding of what leadership was. It was about decisiveness, strength. It's my way or the highway. And I realized that, it was partly because I was in a creative industries. We were pitching all the time, global pitches. There was very room for error, lots of pressure. And it was only later on when I realized I was lucky enough to be elected as the captain of North Bondi Surf Club, which is this like 2,500 people, volunteers. I realized that model of leadership just doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work in a context where you have to have earned authority versus executive authority. I was in charge, but I wasn't really in charge. Huge variety of people doing lots of different things. And I realized you had to have a much more inclusive, open-minded kind of culture where you're taking on board other people's opinions, processing them, and then making decisions. And that required a lot of uncertainty because I wasn't sure, they weren't sure. I was trying to help them lead. And it made me realize that there was a very different kind of leadership style that was more productive and more purposeful in complex situations. And I saw that again at the UN, especially in the field, where you have to make difficult decisions in the moment. What I ended up doing was thinking about, it made me realize there were kind of some pillars that I've understood leadership to be now. I think there were four of them. One is connection, so the ability to see the other person and connect with them and for them to feel respected and understood. reflection. I know we've talked a lot about this in the past. So the ability to step in and outside of yourself and your opinions and your assumptions. Argumentation. I like Hegel's dialectic, which is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. His idea was that in order to grow, in order to have different opinions, you have to pressure test extremes and then find resolutions between them. And that's a really good way of pressure testing your assumptions. And then lastly, creation. We never talked about this. I'm also an artist, abstract and figurative artist. I come from a family of musicians. Mm-hmm. And if you get anywhere near art, there is this uncertainty is a necessary part of it. So you know what you're doing, but you also know you need to do something else. So for me, I had that quote I found fascinating because it felt true. Mm. And having spent the week running leadership development stuff here at the business school, there is a lot of uncertainty, but the connection comes through that uncertainty and connecting with others in a really interesting way. Well, what about you? Do you find...
Well, I'm loving your mix of things, the creativity and art, and that being an uncertain space. Hegel's dialectic might come back on that around dialogue for me. Reflection as a superpower. I think that's incredibly important. For me, one of the things I use in leadership programs is a wonderful poem by a guy called William Ayot. And it's called The Contract, and the subtitle is A Word from the Lead. And in it, it's got this kind of reference to us following the leader, standing up there when the wave hits the rock, handing out faith and confidence like life jackets, holding the doubts and the bearer of our countless hopes and expectations. And I think that probably resonates with your original view. Certainly as a young man, I sort of thought that's what leadership looked like. And it's very much this kind of old traditional view of the kind of the hero leader solving everything for everyone. And I think my personal journey then into different leadership roles in complex environments, a lot of chaos, and in some cases, sort of kinetic violence and conflict, really sort of disabused me quite quickly of that fallacy. And I sort of I was confronted with that. Well, so leadership requires different approaches. And I think one of my learning, also stepping into not just sort of complexity and violence, but different cultural settings. So working in India and then Iraq and then in Eastern Congo and then being based in the Middle East, but working around the world. This idea, I think maybe especially in Papua New Guinea, it's where it sort of dawned on me that I really had no clue what was going on. And all the everything I'd learned, all the kind of heuristics and mental models I had about how the world worked simply didn't seem to apply in tribal highlands contexts in Papua New Guinea. And the kind of lesson for me was the system makes sense to itself, even if it doesn't yet make sense to me. And so letting go of all those assumptions, those preconceptions, kind of leaving them at the threshold and recognizing it's kind of a healthy dose of humility as well, dropping all that certainty and thinking actually the first task is just to seek to understand what is going on and gain some access into the system and some relationships in the system. And so that's leading with curiosity rather than some sort of unfounded certainty. Yeah. And then I think perhaps I'm often involved with contexts that are around identity related conflict. And I think we're seeing maybe in the world increasing polarization and less space for kind of common ground and dialogue in the middle. And I've seen there's a famous Nigerian author called Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie who talks about the danger of a single story. And that really is the danger I saw in these different conflict environments where, because of polarization, everything gets collapsed to this false simplicity. You're with us or against us. And the rhetoric starts kind of ramping up the sort of demonization and dehumanization of the other. And that allows this kind of cultural violence, gives permission for and legitimizes structural violence and in some cases actual direct violence. And so the work is to find ways to re-expand that collapsed complexity and to kind of re-expand people's imagination again to a point where they're able to begin to drop that certainty of their conviction that they are right and the other side is wrong, and just introduce the possibility of multiple perspectives and building some shared understanding of different perspectives which ultimately could be integrated. So this danger of a single story resonates for me, the danger of certainty.
And I also want to ask you this. I know, and you teach on the negotiation course.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Is that one of the fundamental pillars of...
Absolutely, yes. So
how does it work?
Well, so you're right, that both in peacebuilding dialogue and in the kind of negotiation program here in Oxford, it's all about trying to get people away from thinking of these situations as a combat, as a kind of win-lose situation, so-called fixed pie or distributive approach to negotiation, where the more I win, the more you lose, the less you get, and to adopt a more collaborative approach, so not competitive, not debate, but actually collaboration and dialogue, within which you can integrate perspectives and information to at least explore the possibility of creating shared value, expanding the pie so that you get a win-win solution. And I think that's at the heart of peace building. It's at the heart of successful negotiation, especially where it's relational and you want those relationships to be sustained for the long term. Yeah.
Because it's interesting, because I come from I spent a couple of years at the UN. Most of my world is commercial. And there's a really interesting, and we talked about this briefly before, there's a really interesting tension at the heart of it, like a meta tension between being confident and having authority. It's a mindset, I think, and being humble and knowing you're not right and trying to balance those two things together.
Yeah.
And I know if you look at the long-term success of organizations, there are some basic DNA that is required for success, and it requires two things at the same time. One is to exploit what you're currently good at, so that's about optimization, it's about efficiency, it's about what are called sustaining incremental innovation. So it's a known system, there's certainty there. It's one of the reasons I found the question very interesting at the beginning. But also explore what you need to be good at in the future, which may be something different, which is often something different, which is about exploration, risk, more radical jumps. And that is an unknown system. There's a lot of uncertainty there. Those are very different animals. They have a very different way of being, and they often don't like each other. And it means that, because it just really reminded me when talking about how the peace building is trying to, how do you navigate those two things? How do you make money today whilst also making tomorrow? Make money tomorrow. And there's some very interesting theories about why that is the problem. One is what is called a success syndrome, which is organizations are built to exploit. That means the KPIs, that means the operating system, the culture is all designed to hold things together in place. But also, again, this is my psychology background, and I think it relates to some of the peace building stuff you're talking about, which is there are fundamental forces, human heuristics that hold things in place. They're biases. We all have them, whether we like it or not. Confirmation or consistency bias. So if you believe something, you look for evidence to support your belief, which is something which you're talking about before. Functional fixedness. So people find it very difficult to imagine using this in a different way other than a mug. Sunken cost fallacy. So you've invested time and energy into something, therefore you won't let go of it if you don't feel you should. So you get all of these things that hold things in place. And then you've got an even deeper layer of it, which is most people are really, really uncomfortable with ambiguity. There's a couple of really good papers on this. I think it's De Burker. They looked at people's responses to stressful situations. So they said, okay, and they measure their eye dilation, skin sensitivity, heart rate. And they said, okay, you're going to be given two situations. One is you have a 100% chance for a significant electric shock, or 50% chance of a significant electric shock. And they found that people were much more uncomfortable physiologically, but also self-reported with 50% chance of electric shock than they were with 100% chance. So people would rather have pain and know it's going to happen than not know whether it's going to happen or not.
Amazing.
I mean, it's people need control, they need certainty. And then there's also the idea about people don't think they can change their static forces. So they look, so Dan Gilbert did this great bit of research called The End of History, where he said most people, when they look back, they see themselves change. It's natural, it's inevitable throughout their life. But when they ask to look forward, they don't see much change at all. They see themselves as static. So you get all of these things that just hold it in place. The question is, how do you try and fix that? I'd be interested to see actually I've got a theory on this, and perhaps we can talk about it, but I'd love to know what as somebody who doesn't come from that world, thinks what the answer might be.
Listening to you, I think I've sort of experienced this and sort of learned it along the way, probably through a lot of mistakes. So one narrative for my career journey has been gradually moving upstream from sort of being involved in creating violence in the military to sort of being on the responding end of it, humanitarian emergencies, and then violence prevention, and then peace building, and gradually moving up to systems level engagement. And that's also move into more complexity and the human complexity, not just technical stuff. And so everything you said about biases, these all are very visible in conflict situations. Sunken fallacy bias, when you've expended maybe blood and treasure in a violent conflict.
It's hard to give it up.
Yeah, it's very hard to give it up. We're seeing that in different conflicts around the world right now. I think I also found really useful this sort of categorization of different types of problem between kind of simple, complicated, and complex. So Ralph Stacey, the work of Keith Grint, and being, by labeling different problems, acknowledging that every organization each day has all different types of problems. So you'll have some simple problems, some complicated problems, but probably also some more complex, wicked problems, and understanding that the right leadership response is different for each category of problem. That's incredibly useful. And I think in particular, getting away from the certainty of simple problems towards complexity, the right response is not to lead with certainty, not to be the leader up there on the rock, dishing out faith and hope like life jackets and saying this is the way we're going to go, but actually to lead through expressing that uncertainty and holding the space where there can be productive dialogue to take small actions to act in the world, get some data, and then make sense of it. So sort of sensing and then sense making, much more experimentation and trying multiple things. So back to multiple perspectives through trying multiple things. And that's a very different leadership act. And it's really the set of principles around adaptive leadership. And that became our approach to grassroots peace building in that zone of complexity. But I also see it as very relevant for organizations today, where I think every organization, senior leadership, are wrestling with these dynamics around what feels like accelerating pace of change, increasing complexity, technology disruption and adoption, workforce issues, the greater uncertainty in different market forces. All of that feels like a kind of tsunami of increased accelerated change, and no leader can pretend convincingly that they have all the answers. So the right thing to do is drop that pretense. And also something you said about sort of different scenarios where we don't have enough certainty. I don't think we ever have, but in particular now, we don't have certainty of some singular prediction of the future from which we can sort of backcast and create a logical plan. And therefore the right thing to do is construct a variety of scenarios, and the Oxford Scenarios program is a really good method for doing this, where you're constructing equally plausible different futures and then thinking through the set of actions which would enable an organization to survive and thrive in each of those futures. And that's a much better way of letting go of this pretense that we can predict the future, and actually take concrete actions that will enable us to step into complexity and do this constant loop of sensing and sense making. I guess it's also what Professor Jonathan Trevor would call realign. So the old practice of really focusing on alignment and aligning everything strategically with your purpose and then your vision, and then all the resources, technological assets, human resources and systems and processes aligned towards achieving that purpose, that is no longer a static thing. And that sort of act of strategic planning and pursuing alignment is no longer something that is just done every 3 years, 4 years, but actually needs to be a continual process. So he talks now about, in his latest book, Realign, that this is a dynamic capability. You need to be realigning continually. So I think there's something much more dynamic and fluid and uncertain in the world. It feels much more uncertain now than it ever has.
People find it very difficult to see the other and see a point of view. Empathy is a remarkably difficult thing. We barely understand ourselves, let alone other people. Just the ability to step outside and into somebody else's life can be very, very powerful, I think.
Very good. So I understand we've had some questions online.
Yes,
we're going to have a go.
I'm hoping.
Going to be brave.
Hoping you've got a really difficult question. Right. I'm glad you've got this one. How do you see peace building as relevant to managers? And it qualifies. Are there any skills from what might be seen as not core business skills that you see relevant?
Gosh,
I'm going to let you look at that too.
Yes. So I'm immediately thinking of Patrick Lencioni's model of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's got this sort of pyramid model. The bottom dysfunction is lack of trust, but the one immediately above it is fear of conflict, or sort of conflict avoidance. And I think this question speaks to that for me. So I think in every human system, every organization I've stepped into, there are problems around people avoiding conflict, by which I mean they're not having the uncomfortable conversations they need to be having. They're not holding people to account in the way that would be more productive for everybody. And they're not doing that because it feels scary, risky. They feel a lack of confidence, but also a lack of competence. And these are learned skills. You can improve this both in an individual level and kind of within teams and organizations as a collective capability. So yeah, I think those skills to actually lean into situations we might think of as conflict, arguments, disagreements, different perspectives, that is actually really powerful energy in any human system towards potential innovation, new thinking, generative dialogue towards new stuff. And if you close it down and if you avoid it, you're incurring a cost in the system. And that cost is pretty expensive in most organizations. Yeah, and they ignore it at their peril. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Saul, I'm very happy you've got this one. How would you approach the AI transformation from a leadership perspective in terms of governance and guidelines? And then in brackets, because question's not complicated enough already, leader as an information broker who facilitates dialogue and as the sense maker of the transformation.
Come look.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, that.
I've got a view on innovation generally, which is it's only as disruptive as the thinking and beliefs that house it. So AI is very disruptive on lots of levels, but it's only disruptive if it challenges some basic assumptions about your theory, your model. So for me, the way I think about AI transformation is, yes, if AI is questioning the fundamental assumptions around the business model and your culture, then the leaders have a responsibility to check it and go, okay, where are assumptions wrong and where do we need to move through into a different place? The idea of information broker, I immediately thought of, actually, they need to be assumption brokers. which is information is fine, but is the information right? Is it based on assumptions?
I
that
love
we didn't?
Assumption brokers.
I'm making this stuff up as I usually do. But I mean,
Yeah.
because I have conversations every day like you do, with AI. Everybody talks about AI. It's like yes, it's challenging some very fundamental assumptions about many different industries, but a lot of industry it isn't. Or if it is, it's something that's useful to an organization. I always think of it as augmented intelligence rather than
human plus machine.
Yeah. It's just
Human
like
plus AI
there are
agents.
opportunities as well as costs, and we all know that. But yes, I think I'd say assumption brokers as a meta idea there.
Yeah.
Good question.
Okay.
How do you know when a new way forward is the wrong way, in brackets, and needs to change again, as opposed to it not being given enough time to fully see a positive result? That's a good question. I don't know who asked that question. That's it. I'm glad you've got that one.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think this describes quite well the world we're in and the world we need to be in if we're engaging in complexity. So we need to be pushing many new ways forward, not a singular new way, because we don't really know what's going on. So we need to try out lots of things. So I think part of it is an attitude around experimentation, which also includes comfort with failure and a kind of different sort of thinking about risk there, and also the psychological safety within teams to experiment and fail, but learn and sort of fail fast. All of that is in this for me. But how do you know when that new experiment should be stopped? Well, you need to put parameters on the experiment, and it needs to be governed by some sort of sense making around data. But they're saying, as opposed to it not being given enough time to fully see a positive result. So Thomas Edison, fail, and then at some point succeed.
I think that's a classic fudge, which is it depends. I mean, it depends on the KPIs, it depends on the shape of the problem, it depends on the shape of the answer.
Yeah.
But setting up let's use an experiment analogy again. Setting up an experiment where you actually know what the parameters are and you've got some hunches about what the answer is.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I mean, you need different gateways for review, don't you? You can't micromanage every step, nor can you have unlimited number of experiments, but you want them to be running for long enough that they're going to get some useful data, and then a gateway review. Do we double down on this, or do we stop this and put resources into something else? Okay. Tricky. Was that you or me? Sorry.
That was, yeah, I think you're going to
ask you this one. Okay. What's one thing you've learned about yourself during conflict that may be useful for others to hear?
So I'm guessing, is this conflict as in a conflict? I'm going to interpret it as in
anyway. Like
I'm going to interpret it is because there's I've got a much richer palette. Conflict generally in life. This is why I lean into my psychology is seeing the real why. It's always about something else. Often we see symptoms, we see behaviors.
Yeah.
It's never about what you think it's about.
Yep.
It's always about something else. It might be something you've done. It might be something they've done. It might be something the organization's done to somebody else.
Yeah.
That conflict is. It might sometimes, if a relationship, it's just not right. You're just not right for each other. For example, in a long-term relationship, or if you get into a work conflict, it still comes back to the same stuff, which is there's a reason why they're pissed off. You may not agree with them, but they think they're right.
Yeah.
So you have to give them permission to talk about it.
That's
a really good question.
Totally agree with that.
That's a good question.
I would add, if people are angry, if they're visibly angry, then what they need in that moment is to be heard. They don't need somebody telling them how to behave, like calm down, and they don't need answers yet. They just need to be heard. And the sort of mantra I have in my head, which was a gift from another associate fellow here, Erwin Turbit, is stay curious, not furious. So if somebody is angry and emotional with you, don't don't be seduced into responding with emotion yourself,
Exactly.
and don't feel when you're on the receiving end of that emotion. When you're on the back foot, you're at your least capable to come up with a good defense and kind of riposte back. So you shouldn't. Don't respond with an answer, respond with a question. Stay curious, not furious. And it allows the other person to feel more heard and listened to. It also slows things down. You get more information. They're able to vent more. So yeah, I think that would be one golden rule. And by the way, that applies in peace building and sort of kinetic violent contexts, as well as, disputes within teams and organizations. So
I don't know where I got this from, and it might have been me, but argue like you're right, listen like you're wrong.
right, perfect. Yeah, okay.
It's difficult in a conflict situation, but just it's remarkably difficult to do.
Am I doing this one to you?
I think so. I think this is the...
Oh yeah, okay.
Is it an easy question?
It's probably the hardest of the lot to finish.
It's been a long week.
When you don't know what to do, what do you do? Saul. I've got my own answer.
Okay. So, again, this is me as a executive coach. Most of the time, people know what they need to do. Most of the time, I call it a list of avoidance. There's a load of stuff that they're avoiding. It's very similar to what you talked about before.
It's a work avoidance.
So they intuitively know what they need to do. They're just not doing it. So this is me too. I write a list of things that I'm avoiding in that context, and I say, is there a fulcrum point? If I do this one thing, will the others either go away, or will I be very satisfied with what I've done?
Okay.
And I do it. I get a lot done, but I'm an incredible procrastinator. So this actually comes up quite a lot for me.
Okay.
There's also another thing, which is I've got this little mantra which has said, today I will be everything I fear I'm not. So
Leaning into the fear.
Forces you to say, this is what I know I want to be more of that, but I often aren't. And usually that's the mindset dimension to that, rather than the transactional one.
Great. I really like that. I've got a few answers.
One answer to squeeze some ideas out of the last.
One answer is get comfortable sitting in a place of not knowing.
Yeah.
And don't rush to grabbing some certainty from somewhere. And that's individually and organizationally. And then I guess it comes back to what we've described about getting some data in the world. So on an individual basis, having a conversation with somebody you trust, and that could be a coaching conversation, as you mentioned, or it could just be a colleague. It could be opening up the question to the team and starting with that humility. We've got this situation. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So let's figure it out.
Yeah.
And of course, the other answer would be better call Saul. So I think that's it in terms of our questions. Big thanks to everyone who sent in questions. That's it for this edition of Oxford Tea Talks. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please do follow the series. We've got more interesting conversations coming out of Saïd Business School. But for now, it's goodbye and thank you from me.
And goodbye and thank you from me.